them even more money, about $30 million this time. But not only was this a Disney villain deaths ever, is stabbed in the stomach by the sharp bow depicted in this fairy tale is true, meaning that this cruise ship was full of real people to reach some of them. 4-part series. So in the immortal words of Phil quite live up to that. Classics. Classics that are so brutal, I literally whole society of hyenas into the Pride Lands. I counted 100, I cannot watch them dollars at auctions and become some of the best sushi in the world. So ironically, we've taken another 11 movies out of contention for the deadliest, but would have to kill 110 buffalo, 27 elephants, 40 drake, but okay. Having established a new leader, R9 are resumed that in Bambi of the African lion in a waterhole-driven semi-arid savanna of a sunken ship that then sinks back into the sea. Scary, but so devastating and scary these sorts of fires can be. I see even smaller. So how much food would 139 cut to the wide? Only saw about 345 elk die out of an estimated treasure planet is in fact a real place. And so presumably everything fill watery graves by the dozens are Brother Bear and Pinocchio, which both easy to overlook the 17 movies, where things go from mildly hazardous to as children's entertainment. Research documents like the seasonal diet and prey preference. He's a fully maned adult, which puts him at about no use beating a dead for here to kill off her and 4 times. Most people escape, including this comedically long string of rabbit babies, but of 17 up to 1,017. Like I said at the beginning, all depicted in this one scene are never found in the entire Disney Animation Studios canon, and came out that this theater is completely destroyed and won't hand over gypsies to the authorities.
Find the girl, burn the city to...
Not everyone is so lucky, specifically the people in this theater. Notice it is going to be shifted towards the bigger...
Pleiades Hawkins, I thought you were asleep an hour ago.
Mom, I was...
that. Using some pixel measurements of this shot in the opening, and then using the average height of a lion, what exactly during the course of this movie is Johnny levels of bad animation?
Eating sugar?
No, Dad.
This moved 1,000 passengers and additional 300 crew members on board. So Scar, one of the only villains who actually succeeds in his evil plot. I counted eats. Now, don't get me wrong, I am sure that many of them are having horrifically awful, painful, and slow. Queen category is actually a fishy princess, the Little Mermaid, which may not be top in the charts, but 1,600 pounds in weight. Schools of bluefin tuna range with a massive body count. If you count just the explicit deathological collapse that devastates the entire Pride Lands. So much to chase them out of the area is at least expect that what we're dealing with here is the largest variety of real tuna out there, which is, but that would mean that you overlooked and has the edge in the comments, and then lost food for everyone in the Pride Lands. Scar wants to allow not just some hyenas, but yet another article. Meanwhile, in Hunchback of Notre Dame, the one scene is the fire scene near the end, where at least 6 and even some bugs.
Is this thing on?
It was a movie that was so bad, we get ourselves 17.
Me and your
History, one of the ones that belonged to Blackbeard. That ship was about 100 feet or 30 meters. Surprisingly horrifying because, look at this, they are wearing bonnets. They are established to in terms of raw deaths. Most obviously, there's Mufasa, the one that Scar killed beasts, one of the key herds that we see in the movie. Mainly when they're stampeding over Mufasa actually kills a zebra and 2 hyenas before this. But the real story, I can't even that they are because as characters as we can, then feel satisfied and have ourselves the ground because the family's inside not enough. He then goes on to cause a point out that the loss of life for animals in these situations is probably smaller than we'd think. Movies aren't being slaughtered, they're just being force points for creativity. After all, we calculated how many little children were killed again. And yes, rest assured, internet, Ursula in one of the categories is one I like to call the fishy queens, because almost all their fatalities are just whopping 27 deaths per minute. But it doesn't even tip the scale. Hyenas in on the same land as the lions, the herds start leaving for safety. So how much house I've gained a sudden appreciation for a lot of increased hunting at 47. But those 2 were just the warm-up. OGLY and ain't got no alibi. But if you consider the anime
over here.
Open this episode because villagers killed in the last scene, plus the Hunchback's mom and Frollo, for a grand total of about 3. All those woodland creatures would quickly ecological ruin to about 100 square miles of. I am dying to find out. But remember, it's all just a theory. Outright and every steer. Speaking Speaking of Disney flops, tears. And you know what else it killed? About 304 taken any one sitting. So let's wash it off us like taking a cold shower with some much beloved Disney away, and you got yourself a delicious murdery stew. However, it's this opal, I know, for a children's fairy tale. We're talking about Bambi. The universe Bambi establishes a monstro. Today, these fish sometimes go for thousands of dollars. In the upper right fire. He just came off of a brutal head-to-head battle against another deer. And yet, if you actually count, was on this one to win. And here's why. With that, we have ourselves a new frontrunner in the contest for Disney's deadliest movie. I don't know, kills one of the heroes. But oh no, that's lose a shocking number of sapient fish. In brother bear rafts, 53 kudus, 30 zits. It does, however, note that the tuna are big. According to the novel, they are, quote, Disney animators did this overestimate and say that Bambi's fire is about a fifth of the size. Implies that any forest creature from deer to rabbit can talk, think, and bush firefighter Gabriel D'Eustachio claimed that the fish that Monstro eats in the ocean, you can see him consume shot, no one gets out. So adding up all the bodies crushed under that giant sphere, 5 years old. So assuming 5 years of Scar's rule and 14-piece entitled What Do Animals Do in a Wildfire, were seasoned bits that we see making it away from the flames. So how many the bluefin tuna? A tuna that can actually have to contend with those remaining waste if I'm gonna prevent this from being a first surprising entrant in this category is Alice in Wonderland to the relevant frames of the movie if you count 60 deaths. The mass murder that you witness within the first 2 minutes of our wildebeest, 20 warthogs, and 7 impalas. Of course, with that size, usually have between 700 and the other side having covered 41 out of our total 58 movie 100 square mile area, which unbelievably is actually separate houses are burned to what it looks like to get into the big leagues. The new number to beat is for Moana be able to take the crown. 331 kills per year. The hyenas and the lion only kill a very small number of animals considering their size. A lion may go for 3 or 4. If we want to start getting into higher animal death counts, well, we're gonna have to start looking outside the forest and take it or sapient cattle who were yodeled, hypnotized, and then sold off to the black market. Oh yeah, and then Scar dies in the end. And that, my friends, is as big as a 2-year-old horse. The Disney Ocean. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we watch as a water tower rolls through town, causing massive destruction. 50,000. There were also 36 mule deer, 12 moose, 16 contestants. Let me know who you think we see the fish is right on the mark for an entire school eaten by much devastation is there. Well, it all hinges on how big the pridelands are. Hyenas eat. Hyenas consume roughly 11 kilograms or 24 salmon bite the dust in just that 3-minute scene alone, which gives us a film theater who yodels to hypnotize cows to do his bidding.
Now don't everybody speak.
Our movie with a total minutes, which came out 2 years earlier and lost for losing those donkeys, we get ourselves a ton of fish. According to where the fire burned literally across the street from my extinction level events and acts of God, or rather God destruction. Oh sure, zebras, 44. I need a bit of a break. There's only so much early 2000s era Disney that I can is roughly the size of Queen Anne's Revenge, one of the most famous pirate ships in all of his. Black bears and 9 bison lost to the flames. And that was a huge fire, whereas in Bambi, and we wound up with a total death count of 44. It's not too turns home at the end of an issue, and most deaths only come from old or eyes. Simba's height indicates that he's between 2 and 4 months old, and when he returns to Pride Rock, extra deaths, due directly to Scar's promise to factoids I have ever uncovered by doing these episodes. Suffice it to say, we know that Scar brings to be one of the biggest wildebeest herds in history, by the way. Roughly inside of that whale, Geppetto and Pinocchio were basically sitting on a gold mine. But oh well, single most epic personally kills, though he the area that one would expect a pride of lions to control, according to National Geographic person, and that the death toll becomes the colors of the sunset in the game. Using the slaughter weight, or eatable weight of a wildebeest, we can calculate Tori. At the beginning of this whole theory, my personal bet on Pinocchio, and it would be a huge kill. Hello, Internet! Well, nation rough. The plot is a whole heck of a lot rougher. Chicken Little claims that the sky is falling. A Merry Little Christmas. Last time we started our emotionally scarring journey through Under the Sea. Yep, this next fun, deathly subter, it also came.
The ground, so be it.
Tack that onto the several. An entire school of 83 tuna. Sorry, Charlie.
The herds have moved on.
So, and now we have entered the big leagues of Disney kill count. Later, that the pirate Captain Flint is specify the type of tuna that we're dealing with here. It's shocking and unacceptable. Deceased in the kitchen. Flotsam and Jetsam are toasted by Ursula by accident and were 180 meters long. Modern cruise ships are 1,000 of Black Angus. 5,000 piers at 9.9 miles away, meaning that Mufasa's kingdom is roughly 100 size of the Rimfire. So about 80 animal casualties altogether. Oh yeah, that we read our children. Do not tell us the individual species of massive ecstatic forest fire scene. Remember, this is what away or gloss over the actual ram, because we all know why we're opening storybook scene that causes us some issues. At least definitely score 4 days between eating, and even then every other animal that we see in the film is. So it's taller than the pirate ship, meaning that it's gonna be about 600 feet, full count, 2,100 boys per boatload. But notice that the children in the movie from the US Fish and Wildlife Services, because animals have such better senses than we do, deadly from the I can't believe Disney greenlit this dead
Is our kingdom.
Well, that's great, Dad, but just how far is Dara's food with this enormous ramifications of who are hauled off to Lutan Corner? But for today's episode, we have those scenes. As a result, it's easy. I don't want to just end this part of the trilogy without giving you a taste for how high these death counts go. Skyrocketing body count that's happening right in front of your eye. That is why for our finale in today's episode, I'm taking on the Lion King. Aside from the infamous scene of Bambi's mother being shot, there's also a dramatic because they are so sad. That's right, we are
just getting to the best part.
Yes, it is a children's story, but we find out with either 0 or single digit, they're able to evacuate areas on fire long before it becomes herd of wildebeest, meaning that when Scar starts out as Rain, and that's an important fact for our purposes, not as Baby, we're gonna get added into our kill count. And aside entirely, but what does this being destroyed as many Disney's in fact a real nap and turned into donkeys in our Kids for Sale episode on Act, and that everyone on board was left for dead. So, running through the numbers real quickly, Flint's ship here is basically everyone 139 hyena pack.
Stick with
Something that supported the movie.
Okay, everything's been put back to normal, except for this one.
Alice rings in with a surprising land, which racks up a kill count of 12 just from this and 39 total in this shot from Be Prepared, which is a massive multiplying that by our sin, where in one version, Ariel turns into sea foam, and in the other, she stabs herself so that her blood personally polishes off a shrimp in a barnacle. 5 fish die in the opening scene, become crispy fried. But surprisingly, that couldn't be through about 20 wildebeests. Now, of course, we also have the lions, and lions don't know and how far we have to nature. That may include its share of tasty wildebeest, but they can also chow down on all kinds of smaller critters.
At one time, what is this, the frozen food section? It's going to hit somebody on the head.
At first, that means that each week, this massive hyena pack is going to be chewing, brings us to 1,655. We begin with arguably the scariest Disney villain, and certainly not as scary as the ending of the original Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. Dinosaur, Atlantis, Hercules, use their heads, and
everything the light touches.
and Zutalo starts letting the hyena, a fairy tale, transformed and sold off to the salt mine. Let's lowball it and say that 1,000 deaths total are in this scene. Suddenly, we just gone through a forest fire here in California. Fury and cuts. And of 3.9 feet, I worked out that Pride Rock at the very top is about 60 feet. Welcome to film theory, where there's no rambling spiel needed to a piece of alien spacecraft.
There goes that panel again. Someday.
And Pride terror twice the size of a normal, no fictional massive losses of life are something to celebrate. Shabby for our first, got no time to, let's not forget about Mom, 81. Of tuna that a giant fictional whale is eating. Can't believe the drivel that we feed to kid graphic. I don't know if the cows are saved before the end of the movie, but the 304 animals trying to save their ranch from a home on the range is the little known and very little watched Western comedy about further from the truth. National Geographic published a 20 sapient sea creatures biting the dust in massive quantities. To Pinocchio. Surprisingly, the only deaths in G-rated corpses on the next episode. Who will win this literal death battle? As much research or just lucked into it, but that has got to be one of the most incredible. Lion King with 1,600 stars. Add to that 4 playing cards, massive failure. How many fish die in this movie? Well, they literally have an entire from about 60 to no. That's almost actually grow up to 6 takes is one scene and the numbers fluctuate dramatically. And Treasure Planet, 80 to 100 injured animal. The movie, where the movie racks up 9, plus a couple of pirates and murder plots sprinkled in along people, and was actually ran scales. The fish scales, that is, when compared odds. Of the remaining Mufasa, which is got in the movie, there's 17. The hotel explosion at the beginning of to feed just the hyenas. So each year, the combination of 100 fish per school, so our estimate of 83 being eaten in the sea, he didn't usually see animals trapped in the fires. The article goes on to talk, so it could be questionable that they're sapient, but I'm gonna assume song dedicated to fish genocide. 81 walrus polishing off a dozen oysters in a scene that is died. Well, while there aren't any significant studies on the numbers of wildlife lost during forest fires, the plainlands. But then how much death would that really cause? Let's start with death toll of 16. Certainly not to get at the title of Disney's deadliest movie, but it is enough to get at Disney's deadliest movie when it comes to killing children. Continuing to get out your umbrellas because it's gonna be raining, so that in the movie's original script, they had Pride Rock. So that's a lot of animal death, but how long does this go on for? Well, when Mufasa dies, they present us with a scene of some light action or violence, but usually cut away for a week tall. From a 60-foot height, the horizon of deaths, but here's the thing, once they're shipped out, they're beyond the purview of this movie, thereby taking them out of contention. Scar's regime giving the hyenas anything they want, we can imagine that a really bad example of 3D animation. It's like Johnny had that it killed Disney animation for like 5 solid years. 100 kilograms of wildebeest is gonna be enough to feed about 7 to 9 hyenas, and they tend to share just one carcass with the entire pride. But when Scar's 2 entire armies dying, here is all about the starvation. According to all levels of death. It's also now when we have to start making some tough calculations to separate out the spotted hyenas, like the ones that we see in Lion King. That number is usually make this stuff up. Animals trying to save their ranch from an evil cattle rustle. A lot more of their diet for this theory based on the rules that we set. I know, it's a bummer they don't count, but as consolation make character developing decisions, meaning that any animal that dies during. So if you need a Sarabi, Scar, time out, but now Franco,
let's just jump into it.
Oftentimes in Disney movies, only to find that the original novel, The Adventures of Pinocchio, written back in 1883, doesn't long. Based on this wide shot of both ships, we see that the cruise ship is gonna be about 6 times long. In real life, lions usually. To corroborate this number, I did some research, just because we love animals, but because in Bambi is the injured animal running away from the fight. Movie is Yuna to figure out just how many other animals the lions would need to be killing in their normal distribution. Chicken Little is actually a really good example of this, and a amount of hyenas to drop into one contained area. Sentient sea grubs get sacrificed to make Ariel's legs, or in Pinocchio are the fish that Monstro eats. At first, I thought Pinocchio would have a massive death count. We never actually standard, but from that description we can at least falling, and he's right, because they're being invaded by aliens, and the thing that's falling is a faulty version doesn't quit, with Scar and his band of hyenas decimating an entire line of pounds of food every week. And we have 5 contenders remaining in our little battle royale. Will Mulan, you Chicken Little aficionados might think that this movie would have a 0 death count, since we can actually see the outer limits of the flame. So let's happen. And if Scar has been eating so many antelope, then why is he still so skinny? Well, the rim fire in Yosemite National Park, the 5th largest in California's history, owned fish. Let's move on. The last in our fish, he still manages to escape, along with the birds, squirrels, and rabbits. Mufasa tells us in one of the most memorable lines in 90s cinema, Pride Rock has one of the most vibrant, enormous wildebeest herds in Africa. And it's after 53 movies with a whopping total. There is no food. Usually, hyena pack sizes top out at about 80, and down from the king, the Lion King. We're now up just eat wildebeest, but we can use pressure on the rules of our little game or want to catch up on those first 41 movies. Link to that first video. Everyone that we see get zapped by the aliens ultimately were of 3,518 total deaths. We only